Have you ever wondered what happens when the cameras stop rolling? Not just for the day, but for good. What happens when a face that was once a fixed star in the constellation of pop culture, a face that millions welcomed into their homes every week, simply fades from view? We have a strange, almost morbid fascination with the stories of child stars who burn out, who fall from grace in a blaze of public scandal. It's a familiar, tragic story. But what about a different kind of disappearance? A quieter one. A vanishing act that isn't a tragedy at all, but a choice. Tonight, we're not talking about a fall. We're talking about a reinvention. We're talking about a little girl with eyes that held the wisdom of an old soul who grew up in the blinding glare of Hollywood's golden age. A girl who stood on the world's most famous alpine meadow, who flew through space in a silver suit, and who, when the roar of the crowd began to fade, didn't fight it. Instead, she picked up a different kind of lens and began to frame the world in her own way. This is the story of Angela Cartwright. And it's likely not the story you think you know. It's the story of how you disappear from the world's stage, only to find yourself more completely than ever before. To understand Angela's journey, you have to understand the world she was born into. The early 1950s in America were a time of profound contradiction. There was this booming, almost blinding optimism on the surface, a world of neat suburban lawns, gleaming new appliances, and the birth of television as the nation's hearth. Families would gather almost religiously around these glowing boxes, and the faces they saw there became as familiar as their own neighbors. They became part of the family. But beneath that idyllic surface, there was a current of anxiety. The Cold War was humming. There was a rigid conformity, a pressure to fit into a very specific mold of what it meant to be American, to be a family, to be happy. Hollywood, and especially the fledgling television industry, was the chief architect of this national myth. It sold a dream, and at the heart of that dream was the perfect, happy family. And in 1957, television found its perfect daughter. Angela Cartwright was born in Cheshire, England in 1952, but she moved to Los Angeles as a toddler. Show business was, in a way, the family business. Her older sister, Veronica Cartwright, was already a working child actress. But Angela had something special. It wasn't just that she was adorable, with her bright, curious eyes and cherubic face. It was that she seemed to possess a preternatural calm, an ability to be utterly natural in the most unnatural of environments. While other child actors might be coached and prodded, Angela simply was. At the tender age of 3, she made her film debut, playing Paul Newman's daughter in the boxing drama, Somebody Up There Likes Me. Think about that for a moment. At an age when most of us are learning to string sentences together, Angela Cartwright was sharing the screen with a man who would become one of the greatest screen legends of all time. But this was just the prelude. Her real introduction to America, the role that would cement her place in the heart of the nation, came when she was just 4 years old. She was cast as Linda Williams, the spunky, scene-stealing adopted daughter on the wildly popular sitcom, The Danny Thomas Show. For 7 years, from 1957 to 1964, Angela Cartwright grew up in front of America. She wasn't just playing a character. In a very real way, the set of The Danny Thomas Show was her school, her playground, her world. Danny Thomas, a man who could be notoriously gruff and demanding, became a second father to her. He was a powerhouse, a perfectionist who had built his show from the ground up. He didn't suffer fools, and he certainly didn't have much patience for the typical antics of a child. But with Angela, it was different. He saw her professionalism, her innate ability to hit her marks, to know her lines, to deliver a performance that felt real. In interviews years later, Angela would recall the profound respect he showed her. He treated her not as a prop, but as a peer. She remembered him taking her to the studio commissary, sitting her down, and speaking to her like a fellow professional. He'd ask her about her scenes, about her motivation. This wasn't just a job for her. It was an apprenticeship in the craft of acting, taught by one of the masters. There's a little-known story that perfectly captures their relationship. During one scene, a young Angela was supposed to be crying. The director, the crew, everyone was waiting. The pressure was immense. Danny Thomas took her aside, away from the prying eyes of the crew. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He just knelt down and spoke to her softly, asking her to think of something sad. He gave her the space and the emotional safety to find that feeling, and she did. That moment of quiet compassion in the heart of a bustling, high-pressure television studio stuck with her for her entire life. It was a lesson not just in acting, but in humanity. She spent her formative years there from age 4 to 11. While other kids were in regular school, her classroom was a trailer on the Desilu lot. Her classmates were other child actors. Her life was a surreal blend of the ordinary and the extraordinary. She would do her schoolwork in the morning, and then in the afternoon, she would step onto a soundstage and become a different person, a beloved member of America's favorite television family. But as the show wound down in 1964, a new, even more iconic chapter was about to begin. A chapter that would take her from a black and white sitcom family to the glorious Technicolor hills of Salzburg, Austria. In 1964, director Robert Wise was casting for what would become one of the most beloved films of all time, The Sound of Music. He needed 7 children who could not only act and sing, but who could also believably form a family. Angela, now 12 years old, was a seasoned veteran. She auditioned for the role of Louisa, the third oldest Von Trapp child. But Wise saw something different in her. He saw the quiet observer, the thoughtful one. He cast her as Brigida, the 5th child, the bookish, brutally honest truth-teller of the family. It was an inspired choice. Brigida is the one who sees everything. She's the first to tell Maria she thinks her dress is ugly. She's the one who notices the budding romance between Maria and her father. Angela's natural, watchful intelligence was perfect for the role. She didn't have to fake it. She was Brigida. Filming The Sound of Music was an experience that would bond the 7 young actors for life. They weren't just colleagues, they became a real-life family. For months, they were inseparable, living and working together in the stunningly beautiful, but often cold and rainy, Austrian Alps. Angela, already a pro, often found herself in a unique position. She knew the mechanics of a film set inside and out, yet she was also just a kid swept up in this grand adventure. There's a famous scene where the children and Maria fall out of a rowboat into a lake. It looks like a moment of spontaneous fun. The reality was a little different. The scene was filmed in a man-made tank and it was cold. But there was another, more revealing detail that Angela has shared, one that speaks volumes about the bonds that were formed. Kim Carath, the adorable actress who played the youngest child, Gretel, couldn't swim. Julie Andrews had been assured that she would be retrieved from the water immediately, but in the chaos of the take, the plan went awry. It was Heather Menzies, who played Louisa, who instinctively reacted like a real, older sister and pulled the terrified Kim to safety. It was in moments like these, unscripted and real, that the Von Trapp family truly came to life. Angela herself had a quiet, almost secret role during the production. She had brought her own camera to the set. While the massive Panavision cameras were capturing the epic sweep of the film, Angela was capturing the small, intimate moments in between takes. She took photos of her castmates laughing, of the crew setting up shots, of the quiet, unseen moments of life on a movie set. It was a hobby, a passion that was quietly brewing inside her. She was documenting her own life, framing her own experiences through a lens. At the time, no one knew that this hobby would one day become her life's work. These candid, black and white photos she took are a treasure, a personal, intimate diary of the making of a masterpiece. The Sound of Music became a cultural phenomenon unlike any other. It smashed box office records. It won 5 Academy Awards, and it transformed its cast into global superstars. Angela Cartwright, at 13, was one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. But fame is a strange and fickle beast, and for a teenager trying to navigate the already treacherous waters of adolescence, it was a particularly complex wave to ride. The world saw her as the sweet, pig-tailed Brigida von Trapp. But Angela was growing up, and Hollywood, an industry that loves to put people in boxes, wasn't quite sure what to do with her. Just as the world had her pegged as the quintessential girl next door from a musical, Angela made a sharp left turn into outer space. In 1965, the same year The Sound of Music was released, she was cast in Irwin Allen's science fiction series, Lost in Space. She was to play Penny Robinson, the imaginative, animal-loving middle child of a family stranded light years from home. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. She went from the green hills of Austria to the stark, stylized sound stages of 20th Century Fox. She traded her pinafore for a silver spacesuit. The show was pure 1960s sci-fi camp, talking robots, bug-eyed aliens, and plots that were often wonderfully, gloriously absurd. For a generation of kids, Lost in Space was must-see television. And for Angela, it was yet another surreal version of a family life. The cast, Guy Williams, June Lockhart, Marta Kristen, Billy Mooney, became her surrogate space family. She spent her teenage years from 13 to 16 on the set of the Jupiter 2. This was her high school. While other girls were going to proms and football games, she was battling giant cyclopses and dealing with the scheming Dr. Smith. In many ways, the character of Penny was a reflection of Angela's own gentle and creative spirit. Penny was the dreamer, the one who found wonder and friendship even in the most hostile of alien environments. She had a pet bloop, a chimpanzee-like creature, and she wrote in her diary, she was the sensitive soul of the Robinson family. But growing up on a television set is an odd existence. Angela has spoken about the inherent loneliness of it. While the cast was close, they were all at different stages of their lives. June Lockhart and Guy Williams were the adults, the parental figures. Mark Goddard and Marta Kristen were young adults, dealing with their own burgeoning careers and lives. Billy Mooney was the younger brother. Angela was caught in the middle, a teenager in a world of adults. She formed a particularly close bond with Billy, as they were the two kids on set, and their friendship has endured for decades. But there was also a darker side to the industry that she was becoming more aware of. The Lost in Space set was known for its tensions, particularly the rivalry between Guy Williams, the stoic hero, and Jonathan Harris, who played the flamboyant and scene-stealing Dr. Smith. As the show progressed, Dr. Smith became the breakout star, and the scripts began to focus more and more on his comedic, cowardly antics. This shift reportedly frustrated Guy Williams, who had signed on to be the lead of a serious science fiction drama. Angela, the observant teenager, saw it all. She saw the ego clashes, the professional jealousies, the often petty politics of a television show. It was another layer of her Hollywood education. And then, in 1968, after 3 seasons and 83 episodes, Lost in Space was abruptly canceled. For Angela, who was now 16, it was a jarring end to what had been her entire adolescent life. For nearly a decade, she had gone from one long-term television family to another. Her life had been dictated by call sheets, scripts, and studio schedules. Suddenly, it was all gone. The sets were struck, the space family was disbanded, and Angela Cartwright, the girl who had grown up in the public eye, was faced with a question that terrifies even the most seasoned of actors. What now? The late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of massive cultural upheaval. The world was changing, and Hollywood was changing with it. The sweet, wholesome family entertainment that had been Angela's bread and butter was being replaced by gritty, realistic dramas. The counterculture was in full swing. It was the era of Easy Rider, not the Sound of Music. For Angela, this transition was fraught with professional and personal challenges. She was in a kind of limbo. To the world, and more importantly to casting directors, she was still Penny Robinson or Brigitte von Trapp. She was typecast, frozen in time as the sweet, innocent child star. But she was a young woman wanting to explore more complex adult roles. The industry, however, had other ideas. It's a classic Hollywood trap. The very thing that makes you a star as a child can become a cage as an adult. She continued to work, making guest appearances on shows like My Three Sons and Adam 12. But the iconic roles, the ones that defined a career, were elusive. She auditioned for the role of Regan McNeil in the 1973 horror classic, The Exorcist. It was a daring attempt to break free from her wholesome image. The role, of course, famously went to Linda Blair. One can only imagine the impact such a role would have had on her career and public perception. But there wasn't a dramatic public struggle. There were no headline-grabbing meltdowns. Angela's journey was a quieter, more internal one. She was navigating that difficult path from child celebrity to adult life, and she was doing it largely outside of the spotlight's harsh glare. It was during this time that she met and fell in love with a young man named Steve Gullion. They married in 1976, when Angela was 24. This perhaps was the most significant turning point in her life. She was building a life for herself that wasn't defined by Hollywood. She had a partner and soon a family of her own. She gave birth to 2 children, Jesse and Rebecca. Motherhood and marriage offered her a different kind of fulfillment, a different kind of identity. And this is where the story diverges from the typical Hollywood narrative. This is where the idea of the disappeared child star gets turned on its head. Angela didn't vanish because of failure or tragedy. She didn't burn out. She simply chose a different life. She chose to prioritize her family, to raise her children away from the madness of the industry that had raised her. She made a conscious decision to step back. But the creative spark, the artist's eye that she had nurtured since she was a girl taking photos on the set of The Sound of Music, never went away. It just found a new medium. While she was raising her children, she continued to explore her passion for photography. She honed her craft, experimenting with different techniques, including a fascinating hand-painting process where she would add color to her black and white photographs, giving them a unique dreamlike quality. Her art became her new voice. Instead of interpreting a script, she was now the author of her own images. Instead of a director telling her where to stand, she was the one composing the frame. It was a profound shift from being the subject of the camera's gaze to being the one in control of it. In 1997, Angela and her friend, the actress and artist Sarah Nichols, opened a small, unassuming shop in Toluca Lake, California. They called it Rubber Boots. It was a creative space, a gallery, and a boutique where they sold their own artwork, custom jewelry, and unique handcrafted goods. The name itself was wonderfully down to earth, a world away from the glamour of Hollywood. It spoke of getting your hands dirty, of being grounded, of creativity that was tangible and real. Opening this shop was a quiet declaration of independence. It was Angela planting a flag in the ground, defining success on her own terms. She wasn't waiting for a phone call from an agent. She was creating her own work, building her own business, curating her own life. People would wander into the shop, drawn in by the whimsical art, and be stunned to realize that the friendly woman behind the counter was the girl from The Sound of Music and Lost in Space. And she would talk to them, not as a celebrity, but as an artist. She would discuss her process, the way she would meticulously apply oils to her photographs to bring them to life. Her subjects were often personal, her children, landscapes, hauntingly beautiful still lifes. Her art was intimate, reflective, and deeply human. It was everything that her Hollywood career, in its later stages, had prevented her from being. She also began to embrace her past, but again, on her own terms. She didn't just attend fan conventions to sign autographs. She used them as an opportunity to connect with the people whose lives she had touched. And she started to share her own unique perspective on her incredible history. She co-authored a book, The Sound of Music Family Scrapbook, a beautiful collection of personal photographs and memories from her and her Von Trapp siblings. It wasn't a tell-all. It was a love letter to a cherished experience. Then, she delved even deeper into the archives, drawing on her lifelong love of photography and her unique access. She co-authored a stunning coffee table book called Styling the Stars, Lost Treasures from the 20th Century Fox Archive. For this project, she spent years sifting through the forgotten continuity photographs from the Fox studio archives, the black and white stills used to make sure an actor's hair or costume matched from one take to the next. In these forgotten images, she found a hidden world. She saw the unguarded moments of legends like Bette Davis, Marilyn Monroe, and her old co-star, Paul Newman. She saw the art and the craft behind the Hollywood dream machine. She wasn't just a former child star anymore. She was a historian, a curator, an archaeologist of Hollywood's golden age. She was reframing the very history she had been a part of, showing it to the world through her own unique artistic eye. There's no real controversy in Angela Cartwright's story. There are no shocking scandals, no public feuds. The only debate is the one we project onto her, the question of what could have been. What if she had fought harder for adult roles? What if she had landed that part in The Exorcist? What if she had chased the spotlight with more ferocity? But to ask those questions is to miss the point of her life entirely. It's to impose Hollywood's narrow, often brutal definition of success onto a life that chose a different path. The industry has a voracious appetite. It consumes talent, and it is particularly hard on its young. For every Jodie Foster or Drew Barrymore who successfully navigates the transition to adult stardom, there are countless others who are left behind, chewed up and spit out by a system that demands eternal youth and constant reinvention within a very narrow band. Angela's story offers a third way, a path of graceful evolution. She didn't fight the tide. She simply got out of the water and decided to build something beautiful on the shore. Her story challenges our obsession with fame for fame's sake. It asks us to consider what true success really is. Is it being on the cover of a magazine? Or is it being in a small studio covered in paint, creating a piece of art that is wholly, completely yours? Is it the roar of a crowd? Or is it the quiet satisfaction of raising a family and building a life of meaning and purpose, away from the glare? Her significance today lies in this quiet defiance. In a world of reality television and the relentless pursuit of online fame, Angela Cartwright's life is a testament to the power of artistic integrity and personal fulfillment. She reminds us that a creative life doesn't have to be a public one. She is the antithesis of the tragic child star narrative. She didn't just survive Hollywood, she transcended it. She took the discipline, the professionalism, and the unique experiences of her extraordinary childhood and channeled them into a new form of creativity, one that she controlled, one that nurtured her spirit rather than depleting it. She teaches us that identity is not fixed. You can be the girl in the spacesuit and the girl on the mountain and also the woman with the camera, the mother, the artist, the entrepreneur. Her life is a collage, each piece as important as the next. So what happened to the little girl with the big expressive eyes? Did she disappear? Number. She simply focused. She adjusted the lens of her own life, blurring out the noise of Hollywood expectation and bringing into sharp, beautiful focus the things that truly mattered: family, art, and a quiet, profound sense of self. Angela Cartwright never got lost. Not in space, not in the hills of Austria, and not in the often perilous landscape of post-celebrity life. She found her own way home to a place of her own making, filled with light and color. Her story isn't one of fading away. It's a story of blooming in her own time, in her own way, and that in a world that so often celebrates the brightest flames that burn out the fastest is perhaps the most inspiring story of all. It's a quiet masterpiece, composed not on a soundstage, but in the studio of a life well lived.